Hello, everyone, and welcome to this, our final day of Industry Tech Days presented by All About Circuits. I'm Dave Finch, host of Moore's Lobby, the podcast by engineers for engineers. Today is Friday, September 4th already. And if you're just joining us, dude, where have you been? We've had close to 50 technical sessions already this week with hundreds of supplemental technical papers, a bunch of giveaways, so much going on. I found out I was not allowed to enter myself in the drawing for the 3D printer, which, so if anybody wins that, put it up on eBay and I'll be a top bidder. But this has been an exciting week, and we are very excited, very stoked to see the community building that's been happening for all of us in attendance here this week. And our keynote speakers this morning are giants in the industry. This is amazing that we got these three people together. Together, they are representing a sizable portion of the entire electronics supply chain. And they're here to discuss the emergence of virtual supply chains and what that means in our post-COVID world. Mark Burr-Lunnan is Senior Vice President of Global Service and EMEA, Europe, Middle East, Asia, correct?
Europe, Middle East, and Africa.
Africa.
Asia. That's
right. I got ahead of myself because the next one is APAC, so you run everything at Mauser Electronics. Dave Doherty is President and Chief Operating Officer at DigiKey Electronics. Dave, welcome.
Good to be here.
And equally balanced here between the supply and demand sides is Frank McKay. Frank is Senior Vice President and Chief Procurement Officer at Jabil. This is like the triumvirate. I feel like we got all the families together. No, but welcome to Industry Tech Days, and thank you so much. I know you're all exceedingly busy, and business climates being what they are, I really do appreciate your time and your energy this morning. This being something of a panel discussion, I thought it'd be good if we could all just go around the horn and you could introduce yourselves. Let's start. I'm just looking at my screen. Let's start with Dave. And, Dave, give us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Dave Doherty. I've been up here at DigiKey in the upper Midwest for the last 13 years. Grew up in the Boston area. Started off a little computer company called DEC and kind of made that transition from a customer to an OEM, working for a couple of semiconductor suppliers before ending up in distribution. So it's been fun to see this crazy industry from different aspects.
Yeah, that's aptly put. And Frank, you're next there in my window. Frank, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Sure, Dave. Thanks for having us. Frank McKay. So, as you mentioned, at Jabil, I'm from Scotland originally, but for the last 20 years or so, my career has been residing in the US. I'm based out of Florida here, but I've been fortunate enough with Jabil to live in Europe, work in Europe, live and work in the United States and in Asia, in Singapore. And throughout that time, over the last 20 or so years, I've been fortunate enough to have a number of procurement and supply chain roles, and that's led me to the current position I have today, as you mentioned earlier. So really happy to be here, and of course excited to be alongside, as you said, two captains of industry in Dave and Mark as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Frank. And Mark, I butchered your introduction, so a little shot at redemption here. Tell us about yourself.
Actually, I did like it, though, Dave, because you called me a giant, and it's the first time at 5'7" I've ever been called a giant. So thanks very much for that. But I've been around for a long time, 36 years in this business, all in the electronics world. So spent time at Arrow and Avnet, 7 years each of those, got an itch there and moved on. And then spent some time in the OEM side with Philips, which then became Yageo. So had the delights of working with Frank from the supplier side, so that was kind of nice. Then I moved to run the Americas for Yageo, and moved on from there to TTI, where I've been now for the last 13 years in the group. Firstly with TTI in their supply marketing, and also on the EMS side. Again, tying up with Frank, which is nice to see him again here. And then been at Mauser now for 12 years, expanding the global footprint of Mauser to take us out into Europe and Asia. Been fun.
Oh, that's exciting! Being able to kind of build yourself out into a new geographic territory, especially in today's world. That's what it's all about. That's great. Well, thank you, gentlemen. My name is Dave. Obviously, you all know that, but I started at ST Microelectronics back in 1999, and I was an application engineer, then market development engineer the whole time. And then most recently, though, I've been at Premier Farnell and at Aero Electronics in prior years. And so I've had kind of an interesting, just like all of you, I've been able to see the value of the supply chain and good supply chain partners for engineers from two sides of sort of the equation. It's been it's been fun seeing, in my opinion, what the distributors are doing right on behalf of engineers, and it's also been fun watching things kind of go up in flames. No offense to the industry, but there were certain things that I saw that were like, there's no way that brings value, and sure enough, it gets proven out, right, in the industry fairly quickly if you're not bringing value to engineers. And the reason I'm excited to have you three on this panel is talk about bringing value to engineers. I mean, these are the three brands who are doing it, every day and then some. So the first question is for all of you, and no particular order, just jump right in. What is the role of distributors, manufacturers, semiconductor companies in an engineer's design process?
Well, I'll take that one first if I could. I mean, I think it's key in terms of from our standpoint is bringing the latest technology to an engineer. So engineers like to do many things. They have to build lots of new products all the time, and the essence of our industry is all about how we take that technology to another level, how we help new designs, and how we move things forward. So in distribution, it's really a very different model now, whereby there's people who are looking at MPI and there's people looking at supply chain, and all of us have a great role to play in the industry. And but everyone does play a different role in that. And even if you take it back to how a stocking policy works, because this is a real big thing about how the industry works from an engineer's standpoint is, and I'll talk for myself and also talk for Dave here, actually, probably, and I'll hit chip in too. But the way we put a lot of stock in place for a design engineer is to make sure it really is a wide range of parts with a wide range of manufacturers with the latest technology. So that really helps the engineer with those new designs to take things forward, rather than being focused only on the supply chain. Now, of course, some work on both supply chain and the design as well. But if you look at the supply chain distributor stocks very differently. And that's not wrong, it's just different. So they're stocking a very much more limited range of parts for things which go into volume. So when a manufacturer brings out something brand new, well, those people are unlikely to stock it because there's no demand for it. So, but as an MPI distributor, we jump on that and say, okay, the only way to get this product to market, to take new technology to engineers and to help the manufacturers get new customers is to roll those parts out through our model. Yeah?
Makes sense. Wide and maybe a little more shallow, minimum order quantities one versus deep on a limited range. Dave, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The question should really be reversed. The audience telling us, because now Frank certainly has some engineering inside of his building, and he services engineers. But I'd say our responsibility is to adapt to the changing need of the folks that are listening into this. And a lot of it's what they are telling us is what Mark's articulated. Hey, we want choice. We want selection. Don't pigeon us, hold us down to a limited number of products. Make sure you carry them in stock, because when I want them to sample them and start to design with them, I want them immediately. Give me solutions. Don't just sell me parts, but show me how they integrate together to help me make logical choices. The broader you get, the harder at times it's for me to find the stuff that I'm looking on your site. And then it continues from there. Give me content. I've become used to in my life as a former FAE as well, Dave. It's used to be, let me make that phone call and get him to come visit me. And, and now it's make that content available so I can consume it on my schedule, any time of day, 365, 24/7, and we'll continue to listen to the engineers. But I think we definitely play in a space that Mark articulated well that is more geared towards that by having the type of model that allows that long tail of inventory and that type of service level that the engineers on this call are looking for.
Absolutely. That's brilliantly insightful, and taking it out of the lab and meeting them where they are in their lab by serving up that content online. And that's a really important point that I'm glad you mentioned it. And I want to dive into in a second. Frank, your take, you've got kind of the more unique voice, I guess, on this panel.
Yeah, sure, Dave. Yeah. And I think we play a little bit of a different role in that supply chain ecosystem. And I think about it from what do our customers need? And we're very fortunate at Jabil that we've got 400 of the most premier brands that we are fortunate enough to be able to serve. And the service that we are providing them has deepened over the years to the point where we are providing true design services. And really, our part in that is making sure that our engineers and our customer engineers, and I think the guy said it spot on, they need choice, they need flexibility, they need resiliency. And I don't think we spoke too much about resiliency in the supply chain pre-COVID times. And now when we think about it, it is, above all else, I think that is a word that has real true meaning, and people really have to think about it. And I think engineers are thinking about more of the long term. How can I have a sustainable, resilient supply chain when I'm making these early choices? And we're trying to make sure that from a procurement standpoint, certainly, and that's where we use distribution, we find great value in it, that the guys are, they offer a one-stop shop and give us that access to that enormous amount of flexibility and the choice that the guys referenced in their commentary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great. That really sets the stage very nicely for us to dive into a little bit deeper into this now. So talking about the trends in engineers' behaviors and what you've all observed. Mark and Dave, starting with distribution, where and how do distributors think that their products will be bought and sold in the immediate future and in the maybe more distant future?
Maybe I'll jump in on this one. Is that I think we're already seeing it. I think what COVID has caused is an acceleration of a trend that initiated certainly prior to February, March of this year, and it's this e-commerce, this idea that we want kind of local feel, even though we may be geographically distant from one another. I think the statistics in Q2 are showing e-commerce business of all types are up 44%. And so it's you can't predict whether, and it'll be even less predictable going forward, whether the engineer will be in the office or at home. So they're going to want to be able to consume material to acquire parts. Their lab is going to be transportable, just like this call. Instead of us live, we're sitting here on a Zoom call. And so I think companies that have that flexibility, which allows the resiliency that Frank talked about, will be in the best position to meet those emerging needs. And perhaps the last piece of that is the unpredictability. Since we don't know, companies that can be flexible to be able to shift quickly will be the ones that'll be in the best position to move forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think one thing that's changed, I mean, if you look at the importance of inventory has always been a big thing in distribution, but it's almost been quite bizarre that quite a few distributors have started to stock less inventory as we've gone through time. But if you look behind me, you can see our new warehouse, and Dave's got an even bigger picture of his new warehouse, I know, I'm sure. So if you think about it, the amount of inventory that we're now putting in place and shipping around the world is really helping drive a lot of that engineering buying. The longest it takes to get to Europe now is 2 to 3 days to anywhere in Europe and into Asia. It takes probably 2 days to get there, can take up to a week to get to the end customer. But that's good enough for most engineers when they're doing their designs. And a lot of the local distributors now are just not stocking the inventory. We're able to stock it on a global basis. So if you're a local distributor in Spain, for instance, you're going to be stocking a really narrow list of parts for that Spanish market, whereas we're stocking it for every market in the world, which means it is wider, which means everybody has the availability of every manufacturer that we have, which is, we got over 850 of them. I mean, Dave's got as many or more, however many it is, but we have a lot of the key franchises, and it just makes a difference now that if someone's trying to build a bill of materials, you almost have everything on there that you can get in one place at one time. And really, most places in the world, you can get it from next day to probably 3 days anywhere in the world. And it's just very efficient. And we got some great logistics partners who help us do that. And without them, it would be tough. But they've done a great job. And even through COVID, they've been really good. Right.
And have you seen, just in terms of, the inventory levels, your turns ratios, whatever the metrics you want to use, have you seen, since everybody's been shut down or was shut down there for a while, and maybe there's different size teams either going into the office, working from home, are you seeing differences in the way that maybe the quantities or the average order values, have they gone up, down per purchase?
I think it depends what you're talking about and where. I mean, we certainly saw probably in the April, May, June timeframe a huge increase in medical people coming to us who probably hadn't come to us in the quantities they were at that point in time. But really overall, I mean, with the customer bases that we have, I mean, literally, we've not seen too much difference. We've seen more engineers continuing to build, whether they're at home or not. And if you look at most factories, which I'm sure Frank attests to, is most of those factories are working. So it's like our warehouse. Our warehouse is working, but the office staff are not in the office. And just like a lot of production lines are working, but lots of the buyers are at home. So it's just a change in the mix of what people are doing, but there's still a lot of manufacturing going on. There are some countries which are badly affected, but certainly from an engineering standpoint, we're seeing more parts being shipped out now than we saw last year.
Really? Well, that's encouraging. So Frank, I've got like 10 million other questions on that, but sticking to the rails here, Frank, before I go down a rabbit hole here, could you tell us a little bit about the nature of engineers and how they have been and how they are engaging with EMS providers like Jabil?
Yeah, sure. And I would just touch on a couple of things the guy said there as well, Dave, and I agree with, I think, pretty much everything he said. I think engineers are no different or reacting no different than we are in our personal lives in terms of the demands and expectation that we have these days. When we want to make a purchase, you want it on your doorstep, as quick as humanly possible. I think engineers are the same. When they order something, the expectation now is that they get access so they can start doing their job as quick as humanly possible. And I think that's coming from a lot of the products, maybe stepping away from the healthcare side that Mark was referencing. But when you think about the wider industries that the three of us serve here and the engineering community that'll be listening to this, the audience, product life cycles have shortened enormously over the last 10 years. So that time to market, that race to engineer products, I think just ratchets up. And, there's just a little bit more pressure on everybody to move at that faster pace. And I think we're seeing some of the processes and the technologies that we're developing, certainly in the procurement space and the distribution space, just to be able to service that need, I think is helping the engineers get access to those products and get their hands on it a little bit more faster than they traditionally were a number of years ago. So for Jabil's part in that, we have invested, and I'll use the word massively because I think that's appropriate, over the last 10 years. And when I think of it 10 years ago, I think there was still a little bit of a question mark on, and I'll just call it the EMS, manufacturing solutions space for a second. There's a bit of a question mark on, did we have the right to play in the design space, and did we have the credibility and, as I say, just the right to be in that space? And I think there was a question mark 10 years ago. I think we've answered that question with the investments we've made, the success we've had, and the trust that customers have put in us. and the success that is led to those that customer trust in servicing those collaborative ways in which we work with the engineering community and the customers that the three of us in this panel serve.
Yeah, Frank, when we were speaking last week, you made a really interesting point, and something that in 21 years in the industry I never even thought of, and that being the value of an EMS partner wherever you are in the process, whether it's at the front end of the design, helping with design for manufacturing, which we just did an entire podcast episode on that and published it a couple days ago, or towards the end when you're actually like building and assembling. You made a really good point about being able to ramp up and ramp down production manpower, scale that up and scale it down regionally very efficiently. And this is the sort of thing that speaks to when you say engineers are no different than anybody else. We've become a culture that is accustomed to, I ordered it, I can't believe I have to wait 3 days. I want it tomorrow. So I think the ability maybe at companies like Jabil to be able to scale up and scale down these engineering and manufacturing teams very quickly is also a very compelling reason to partner early with an EMS.
Yeah, no, you're spot on, Dave. And that is, I think, part of the value proposition that we offer these days. And we've made investments in our global footprint in places that, it's not easy to start up from a greenfield site and get it up and running and get it running to a point where it is an efficient, thumping manufacturing facility. And there's all sorts of challenges that come with that. The brick and mortar, the labour, the skill set that's required, partnering with universities and all the other fun stuff that comes along with it. But what we are really good at is taking those products that these phenomenal engineers come up with, and we can get them to market really, really quick, and we can scale up at a very, very fast rate, and we can scale down, which is just as important. As I mentioned, the product life cycles that we're dealing with these days sometimes are as short as 6 to 8 months. Just think of cell phones and the rate of change there, and how there's a new product on the shelf every 6, 8, 9 months or so, and we have to react to that and that different feature set and stripping the line out and retooling, re-engineering, redesigning in a collaborative sense, and then getting into production again. So I think that's something that we serve the community very well in.
Absolutely. And that's one of the greatest pieces of value in the entire equation. In fact, I perceive one of the greatest values of supply chain partners is weathering disruption. Dave, where do you see supply chain disruptions occurring nowadays?
Sure. There's really 3 different areas, and this is pretty unique. We've dealt with them due to spikes in demand of certain industries, i.e. the automotive a couple of years ago. We've dealt with them due to natural disasters, flooding in Thailand, or volcanic eruptions or tsunamis, but never have we dealt with them. Those were discrete events that we would rally and overcome, and it would subside. This is one that just, the gift that keeps on giving. You think you have it under control and it pops up and we're worried about the fall. So we see 3 areas. One is country specific. What is happening? The supply chains are global. There's suppliers upstream that have product coming from all around the globe. And when there's a restriction in one country, it's going to naturally ripple down to the next. And I think right now we're kind of in a period of stability. It was crazy in March. It is now fairly stable, and we all worry about what will happen later on. Will we see some of the spikes that we've seen in the U.S. and some of the other countries? We also see the demand. There was a big pivot from areas like automotive to areas. We still see temp sensors that are used for temperature screening going in a building, or other healthcare products. They've shifted the demand of certain products, which will again create a temporary supply chain imbalance that you've got to react to. And then the third is transportation. It never would have occurred to me how much product from our manufacturers is transported on commercial airlines until they've been essentially decommissioned and continue to be. So you've got an industry dealing with the countries, the transportation, and the difference in subsegments. And so I think, as Mark mentioned earlier, we're in a better position than most. Our model is because it's built on having inventory. And so there's a natural buffer upfront, particularly for NPI activity. And it'd be interesting to get Frank's perspective on the other part of his business on the production side, because it's a totally different game. But this one's different, unique to my 35 years in the industry of what we're facing now, and how do we plan for that nimbleness? Because it's not going to be we're done. We're going to see what happens again next month and the month after.
Yeah, I will say this, and I do not say this flippantly. I say this very sincerely. I don't envy, the positions of anybody who is just trying to operate a stable supply chain, especially nowadays. Like you said, everything down to planes. Oh man, these things have been grounded, and are there certain like concrete indicators that you can use, Dave, to sort of track these effects or predict them?
I'll let the other speakers. We're not great at predicting them. What we try to be very good at is relationships and communication, is knowing up front what are the potential risk areas. And, as a private company, as soon as we see any risks, we are not averse at all to saying, let's mitigate that the old-fashioned way by just getting in more product as soon as we can and as quickly as we can. But, communication is key. It's the fact that we're locked down. In many ways, it's afforded us more ground time. We're not in airports. We're not locked in on a plane. So we have more calls like this going on with more partners every day. And so I feel like I have a better real-time handle on what's happening in China or Singapore or the Philippines or Germany than I've ever had before.
Interesting. So Mark, do you, is there a science, I guess is what I'm getting at, to being able to predict these, or like in the case of DigiKey, is it more about, well, we can't necessarily accurately predict, but what we can do is be nimble and responsive?
And that's really the model that we have. I mean, and a lot, as I said earlier, comes down to inventory. If you have inventory, lots of these problems go away. I mean, if you can't supply the parts, it doesn't matter what's happening. If Frank can't build it because we don't have the parts, then he has a problem. Yeah, it goes for all customers. It goes for all engineers. So the big thing for us is make sure we get the simple things right. Now, we don't have the logistics side in our hands. It's third-party providers. But as I said earlier, they've done a great job for us, even getting it into places like India when they're on a total lockdown. DHL had rules where they could still send in medical devices for medical things into India. And lots of other countries have been the same. And as Dave said, we never knew how much product went on commercial aircraft. It's quite surprising. But it's getting there, and and we've had very few people saying it's late. And I think what's happened in the world now is we've all got used to buying online, and we almost don't care where it comes from, which is great. I mean, we're in Texas shipping to the world. Dave's up in Thief River, Florida, shipping to the world, and it gets there. And it's only when it doesn't get there that people start to worry and say, what's gone wrong, where's it coming from, and all those things. So that doesn't happen. It's just a system that works with a lot of inventory moving around the world every day. And, from our standpoint, we got 20% of that is in NPI inventory to help the engineer. So 20% of our inventory is there to help all those engineers out there trying to do their new designs with the latest parts.
And NPI is an important piece of this equation, not just for the engineers, who are most of the people who are watching this at home right now, but also the component manufacturers. Love having a nice NPI runway, a good NPI partner, because one of the reasons you partner with a good distributor, let's face it, is also for customer acquisition and to be able to get those new parts into a mass audience that you just can't reach with your own sales organization. Frank, I'm curious, what from the production side, what safeguards do you have in place to protect your customers and your business from these frankly uncontrollable issues?
Yeah, sure. Again, along the theme of having made some, I think, pretty strategic, sizable investments, and ours is really in technology, Dave. And it wasn't just during COVID. These were decisions that we made a number of years ago around gaining further transparency in an end-to-end supply chain. and doing that deeper dive on, who am I actually dealing with? Who's on the bill of material? What second sources do I have? Do I have a third source? What does that third source look like? Where is the manufacturing? And then when it's shipping, and the guys are spot on around just how much of freight is in the belly of commercial airlines. It's massive. And when that disappeared, that caused huge issues, and everybody scrambled towards the traditional carriers, where I think most people thought freight was carrying on, the DHLs, the UPS, the FedExes of the world. So there was a little bit of a few months there of everybody fighting for the same space, and those guys having to ratchet up capacity. So something I think we learned there. But those technologies that we've invested in give us a much more transparent view of the supply chain, and it allows us to make decisions early. It allows our customers to make decisions, and we can inform them where we think risk pops up, whether that is a particular sole source part, whether we think it's because the front end is done in Taiwan, but the back end is done in Philippines, and the Philippines has got challenges and issues that we can see because of earthquakes or floods or any of the other things, or military issues that are going on, macro, microeconomics. We can bring that to the surface and allow customers to make, I think, really informed decisions about the next generation of products, just so we can continue to get a little bit smarter in where we place our bets when we think about building the applications and products, and making sure that we make, again, a little smarter decisions on who we partner with.
Well, smarter decisions. And you mentioned something a second ago that that rings very true in this remark, is that communication is key. So there of course will be hiccups, whether you could have all the planes in the world flying, no COVID, everything's, nothing has ever been great or perfect, is my point. And I think having the communication and having that sort of sense that whether it's your manufacturing partner, your distribution partner, knowing that that company has your back, that they are very much an extension of what you're working on. It's not just, there's the site with the cheapest components, we're going to go with them. It's really knowing who is supplying your components and what they've got in place.
And maybe if you give me a second, I can think something. And by the way, I'll put myself on the spot a little bit here, and we could throw it out to Dave and Mark and see if they actually feel this. But you can have the best technology investments in the world, and I think we've done some really smart things. Obviously, a little bit biased here for Jabil, but I think we've done things that are with a mind to help smooth the supply chain, take risk out, take waste out, and get it to a point where we can keep our customers in a cost leadership position, and that's obviously the role of procurement. But it doesn't matter if you don't put really smart people in place and put that connection point with. And we've got a large selection of suppliers, and these two gentlemen here are a critical part of our supply chain ecosystem. So we've invested in resources that actually partner with companies like Mouser and DigiKey, so that we can better understand, where are these companies, where are they heading, where are they investing, and can we have an input in that? Can we help them to help us as well? Can we get a window into product roadmaps? Where the investments are going, as our new facilities open up, can we take advantage of things that we're working on and laying out for the next 5 years so we don't get left behind or caught out in there? I think we do a decent job in that, not to say we're perfect by any manner of means, but I think we do the best we can to ensure that we look not only upstream but downstream with our supply partners as well.
I think, Frank, just a quick answer on one thing on there is I think honesty is a big thing too. And if we look at it from the standpoint of a Jabil, I mean, you've got design sites, you got a lot of design engineers around the world, you got high mix, low volume sites, you got low mix, high volume sites, and you need an honesty from your supplier like us to say, well, this is where we fit. We really fit with your engineers. We really fit with that, high mix, low volume. But we're not the guys going to be supplying your production line, which is doing Apple and the high volume. So you need the honesty from the supply chain. And I think with what you've built, I mean, and other people have built too, is that that honesty with a certain number of key customers and suppliers really does make a big difference.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd add to, especially to this audience, is there's some natural concern that says if there are constraints, hey, I'm just a small guy. I'm building small quantities. I'm trying to get my design off the ground. How am I ever going to get product when there's that cell phone guy with the fruit on his logo and other big gorillas looking for parts? But I want to emphasize what Mark said, that our suppliers, the manufacturers, they care a lot about the designs of the future. And so guys like DigiKey and Mauser are at the front of that podium when we say, hey, we don't need a million parts or 100,000 parts, but we need enough to continue to seed the designs. And I can make you some level of comfort to the audience that they listen to that. And there's a high priority in making sure that if there's X amount of product, it's in places like the two of the distributors represented here to service the tens of thousands of customers that are attending your conference this week.
That's exactly right. I have the luxury of being a completely impartial voice on the panel, because I don't have a horse in the race, so to speak. And I can vouch. I can, as both an engineer who, I'll just be very honest with this. My butt was saved countless times by the fact that we had both DigiKey and Mauser. I can't imagine what would have happened with some of my programs and projects. And I know that part of it was the ease with which I was able to locate the component, understand that, yes, I was looking at the right data sheet, the most recent version. And like you mentioned earlier, Dave, is yes, we're there to support you. Yes, we have the inventory. And by the way, here's how this assortment of products comes together as a solution. And by the way, maybe even here's the firmware that we recommend running with it, or that we've personally developed ourselves. And so I can vouch for at least the folks on this panel have had my back personally in my engineering career. So take that for what it's worth. This, which actually leads us to our very next question. Actually, that was an excellent transition, Dave. So what will distribution look like post-pandemic? Is it predominantly going to be e-commerce from here on out? Is it engineers like myself who would much rather go and find what they need online than have to maybe deal with a salesperson face to face? No offense to salespeople. Some of my best friends are salespeople. What do you think about that, guys?
I think a lot of industries have learned a lot in the last 6 months, and my wife's learned to shop a lot more online, and I think the electronics industry is the same. We'd started to see a lot more of that happening beforehand. You've seen the growth of a Mauser and a DigiKey over the last 10 years, and I think that's going to continue. We're in the right place at the right time, and COVID really is a great upside for us because we don't have to totally change our model. I feel sorry for some other guys out there right now. I was talking to one distributor who said he had 2,000 field people. Well, we have 0. So it's been we're kind of lucky that, we can continue to do what we do. We can continue to lay in more inventory. We continue to bring in more MPI. We continue to add things to the website to make it easier for the design engineer to find technology on there. But at the same time, we're not having to worry about what do we do with these thousands of people, being salespeople or FAEs, to try and transition them into a different model of working remotely, which may go on for a period of time, or FAE, where does that now fit with regards to the design engineering cycle when people get so used now to getting that information and enough information online to make a real valued decision, because the engineering community is not stupid. They can make really good designs out of information that's provided on websites these days.
Yes. Dave?
Yeah, what comes to mind to me, I chuckle because the younger portion of your audience, which is probably most of them compared to me, will give you a big duh. When I'll digress for a second. Now in times of COVID, you spend your time a lot more at home. I cooked my first brisket. Mark will appreciate this, being down in Texas. And I went right online to learn how to cook it, how to slice it, and what does slicing against the grain mean? We had an issue with the car and the window wouldn't go up and down. And, in the past, you'd bring it to be serviced. I go online and they instruct you, hey, before you do that, open the panel and check this, take the cap off, take a Q-tip and rubbing alcohol and clean the contacts. And sure enough, that saved us $500 for a visit. And it's that type of self-serve, but make that rich content available so it is accessible. And as been pointed out, we're on this path. We service Frank and his engineers remotely because that's the way they want to be serviced. The media surveys forever have told us it got to the point where the average number of hours per month the customer wanted to talk to the sales rep. And I was in those shoes. And like you, Dave, have many friends, it was 4 hours a month. So, again, this isn't a new phenomenon. I believe it's just an acceleration of a path we've been on.
Absolutely. So I've seen some digital strategies that were pulled together in the distribution industry that were not successful, partly because they were not being approached by people who either understood engineering and what it means to be an engineer, or they weren't willing to slow down and just listen to what it means to be an engineer. They said, no, this worked for selling purses and shoes. It's going to work for electronics. Like, we don't shop for things the way that we tend to shop for purses and shoes. We have a problem to solve. And if you can meet us where we are and say, oh yeah, we too have solved that problem. Here's a library of resources, and use that. I will hang out with that interface all day long, and I will whittle down to component selection, to the part number, to the package, and I will order and buy. If I'm being engaged in a journey, so to speak, a workflow or a content flow that sort of narrows me down to my range of options. That to me is what makes sense, because again, I know that the distributor website, like an e-commerce platform, isn't representing one line card, it's representing nearly all of them. And so if you're truly taking care of the engineer, you will meet her where she is and serve up that content, which you're both doing extraordinarily well. And I want to pause that there because, again, I keep going down these rabbit holes. My phone is lighting up with texts from our producer saying, stick to the script. Frank, on your side, this is an impossibly dumb question, and I'll admit that, but as an application engineer, I never had to design anything for manufacturing. So that was one sort of big miss, big, huge gap in my career. I've never launched something into production, so to speak, electronic design related. Furthermore, they kind of foolproofed it for me at ST Microelectronics, where I just had to design my board. And then once electrically, I knew that everything was working. My firmware was great. The process was, give this to our layout person and let him take it from there, because I promise you, Dave, you will screw this up. So, and it wasn't just me, it was all of us young engineers, right? Frank, for the engineers listening to this, I've got a prototype that, before I go and ask my procurement department to say, let's freeze this bill of materials and call this design done, I just kind of want to order some prototypes on my own. What does that look like on the front end when you're dealing with these larger EMS partners such as yours?
Yeah, I think if I just go back again, maybe 10 plus years ago, Dave, I don't think, and I say this with all due respect to my own profession, but I don't think we've earned the right in an engineer's mind to be able to have that conversation with any credibility. Because I think we were coming at it from we can take cost out only. We weren't thinking about performance, functionality, feature sets, or quite honestly, design for manufacturing. Now I think we've got, and I'll just speak for my own organisation, I've got a bunch of former engineers buried inside procurement so that we can have those intelligent conversations with design engineers, and we are thinking about beyond just a cost position. We are thinking about the resiliency and design for manufacturing and all the choice and everything else that we kind of talked about through this session. So those conversations are much deeper, they're more rich, and the engineer is much more willing to have that conversation with a procurement person who, in today's environment, can speak the same language, and they're not looking at them saying, hey, you're a commercial guy and I'm a technical guy, and we're not going to have a conversation that makes sense. Those days are beyond us, thankfully. And I think we're still in the early years, but I think as we continue with that path, and as procurement continue to invest in engineering type talent, I think those conversations will just continue to get better. For me, and I press my team on this probably more than they would like, but for me, if you have an engineering background, or you have a financial background, or you have a legal background, you are a perfect fit for a procurement role going forward. Go back 10 years, those three professions were so far away from commercial procurement, and now I think there's more of a mix going on, and that's, if I get any of those three disciplines that want to come into procurement, I'm all ears, because the conversations just become richer.
That's really interesting, and I'm also fascinated by this mention of people investment. So, on the one hand, we're looking at some distributors, even 5-10 years ago, we're like, yeah, nobody can beat us on field support. And now they're thinking, ooh, like we can't even fly our people. Oh boy, what do we do? And that's a real concern. Headcount is manpower is not cheap, especially in electronics, to find good people. So those investments had already been made, and now they're thinking, what do we do? You're saying, Frank, on your side, in order to maybe do right by the engineers, to the customers, I should say, better to invest in people who really understand manufacturing, design for manufacturing, not just cost out, and not just, well, we can get a better deal on, these 080, whatever, it's more about meeting them up front and being kind of that design partner, and that requires kind of that people investment. Am I seeing this the right way?
No, you are, and in fact, we use, we've a model inside Jabil, and I'm sure many others in our space do, a network optimization model. So we're thinking about design. Our folks are actually looking at that product and looking at where will it end up, even before, when it's a schematic and it's just an idea, and the engineers are actually getting to the point where it would be something that would fly and go beyond just prototypes and MPI, and actually be something that could be in production. We start thinking about where would that most likely be built? Where's the end market? What does the supply chain look like? Where could the disruption points be? And that helps us make smarter decisions, along with the design engineers as well, on, okay, if we put all this together, what should that look like? What do those decisions mean, when we think about the end state of that product? So we start thinking about it that way. And for that, Dave, that means we need to invest in really smart people who know what the hell they're doing, what they're talking about. And that's why I gravitate towards folks with maybe a little bit of a different background from their education or their experience as well. And that's why I gravitate towards. That's why I was so excited to come on to this call, because I'm talking to an audience I think I understand infinitely better than I did 10 years ago. In fact, to the point where I try and coach the profession to come over into the procurement world as well.
Well, yeah, I just got the exclusive inside scoop on industry poaching. No, you know what? I know sometimes people get hard feelings about that, but I have been poached, and I have poached, so I'm not perfect. But that's the thing, is there's so much talent in the industry, and the talent is free to move. It's fluid, like it's like water; it can go where it needs to. So, to me, this all sounds like very positive things for the engineers, in my opinion. So one last question from me before we move on to the interactive Q&A with our audience. We've been getting some really sharp questions from our audience and from our community members as well. And the big question, I think, around this is, how are distributors and manufacturing partners working with engineers to bring very specific value? We've got engineering services that can be provided by distributors now. We've got engineering services that can be provided by manufacturing now. From where the engineer is sitting, we can start with Mark, and maybe just speak to how do you want the engineers to be using you? What is your ideal role there in this kind of support role?
Actually, it's quite. I use a strange word actually, and that's the anonymous engineer, which has been picked up a few times now. Is that I think in the world, the way it's changed for the engineer, they have a lot less time. So the days when whether it's someone from a supplier going in to see a customer or a distributor going in, now those engineers don't have time. But what they want to remain is anonymous, because the problem is if they buy it from a manufacturer direct, or they buy an engineering quantity from a volume distributor, suddenly they got people crawling over their front door and building, trying to come in, wanting to talk about things, not in COVID, of course, but in normal times. So I think for us, and also like DigiKey, I'm sure, those anonymous engineers, like at Apple, they know if they do a new design, they're going to get people coming in to see them. If they buy from us, it's anonymous. They can just get on, they do their next design, they do their next part, and the whole process is a lot easier. So that's a real value which is being added, and it sounds like a crazy value to add, but time is a big thing. And I think as we come off the back of COVID, some of the issues that people are going to have is with furloughs and people being laid off. There will be less people doing less things, which means those who are there are going to have less time to do what they used to be doing. So I think that's going to be a big thing for us. So really making sure we've got all the latest. It's not all about just components. It's really about content. It's about applications and technology, because typically an engineer doesn't always start with the part that he wants. He starts with, I need to make this. So going from the standpoint, I need to make this. Well, if I need to make that, which parts do I need to do that? And then he goes off and starts to look at websites and pulls it all together and buys it. So it's a kind of an interesting world as we move forward, but I think we're pretty well placed for that. So.
It's interesting. Frank has been very transparent on how their company has evolved. And I think two areas that we need to be better to meet this audience's needs. Data is one, but I won't go down that path. But the second is working with the manufacturers. I think for too long, we've looked at traffic as competitive. Who's getting the web traffic, the manufacturer or the distributor? Who's talking to the customer? When in reality, we both need to be. Certainly engineers have said, I like the anonymity that Mark references. I like the breadth of solutions, so there's no bias. But there's a richness of content that you're not going to beat the guy the guy or gal who designed the part and put it into production. So how do we create a better customer experience to, just as if I walk into a large retail store and I'm building some appliance and I've got the plumber or the electrician in the electrical department giving me that information, how do we meet their needs? And I think that's where post-COVID we will accelerate. When we say we're accelerating that in an e-commerce world, the digital experience will get even more powerful. It'll get more transparent, and you'll see having the best of both worlds. The breadth of the supplier base we bring to bear with that rich content that a particular supplier brings to bear as you narrow or broaden your search. And we'll react to how you determine to do it. But it's got to happen. Otherwise, we don't want to put the customer into a situation where the manufacturer is trying to hold on to him to limit the competition, and the distributor is trying to hold on to him to limit the places that he can shop.
Right. I think if you're solving problems on behalf of the engineer, that's exactly what you're talking about. It's not gripping and clutching. It's you need this, we can provide it, and there are lots of other entities kind of in our ecosystem that you can go on to next, for the next phase of your design. Frank, what about you? What this is such a philosophical, weird question, but it's the one that was front of mind for me all morning. What would be your ideal sort of collaboration engagement with a company, with a team of engineers, whatever the case may be?
I think let me have a bash at it, Dave. The earlier we can have a conversation, the better, so we understand exactly what it is. As Mark said, what is that thing that you're trying to design, and we can start working back. And I think the earlier we can get involved, we can offer, I think, a wider set of options. And I'd even take it beyond the electronic space, areas where we've invested to give the engineer access to more choices, things like additive manufacturing, active alignment in the optical space as well, and tooling around the skin of a lot of the products that engineers are working on today. So try and give them what we can offer proto labs and spaces for them to work in if they don't have access to it within their own companies. Again, if it's a startup company or something that doesn't have access to capital or funding, we can provide some solutions there as well to give the engineer the best chance possible to get that thing to come to life and come to market. So just giving that engineer all the access we possibly can to all the potential technologies that what he's trying to get designed could then come to market. And obviously the carrot for us, of course, is we'd love to then take that into a production manufacturing environment and be. So we make bets, strategic bets on a lot of the engineering community that's out there today, in the hope that what they've landed on is something that we think will make it to market, will have a life, and will have a revenue attached to it that we can both share in. So there's definitely a shared vision right at the start, and then we can work with engineering community to try and get that product to life. But the earlier we can engage in those conversations, of course, the better.
Yeah, collaboration. It sounds like collaborative customer is the best customer in this situation. And certainly, yeah, you do have to make your bets, and that's also part of the nature I've learned. Building the business case around whether you're a distributor, whether you're a manufacturing partner, or a direct salesperson. The key is partnering up early, understanding, hey, this design, this product really has legs. We would like to help you grow this to what you're calling your ramp up in production volumes, but even scaling that further. And it won't be as painful as you think. And that's what I would like for engineers to take away from this session. If I could offer this up, is that the infrastructure, the ecosystems that exist in the supply chain, whether it's component sourcing, production, logistics, what do you do after the things have been built? RMAs, tech support, all of this stuff. These ecosystems exist. And so just understand your role, what you're good at, and understand that there are partners out there that also have just decades and decades of enterprise success in doing these things. Like I said earlier, I'm glad I'm not somebody who has to iron out supply chain kinks, because that's math that my brain can't even comprehend. So I think, I think one way that we can also meet engineers is through the content. And I know that both on DigiKey and Mauser, Mauser's been winning awards for the video series and just that really good, strong content for engineers. DigiKey, you can go on to digikey.com and be reading technical articles to sort of learn at your own pace. And I think it's interesting coming out of a supply chain discussion, especially during a pandemic. One of the key messages I think that we're all taking away is with the three people we have on the panel today, they're making it very easy to be self-led learners, learning at your own pace, and self-made sort of manufacturers, because they've got the content, they've got the expertise, they've got the manufacturing solution. And anyway, I think this has been just a killer conversation, and I think I did an okay job managing my rabbit holes I wanted to go down, but we'll see. So what I do want to do, though, this has been really illuminating, and I want to make sure that our audience has the chance to join the conversation. So, by the way, if you're watching this and you have the good fortune to be with us live right now, you can submit your questions in the chat widget, and we will do our best to get them answered. There's a lot of questions, but we'll just kind of pick them at random. So I've got a scroll going right now. Please bear with me as I read them. This is from somebody named Lawrence. Lawrence, what effects has COVID-19 had on global supply chains, and what is your forecast for the remainder of the year? Who wants to field that one?
I'll take it first. I mean, it has had an impact for sure, and it's a messy year in the fact that it's affected different parts of the world at different times as we've gone through the year. And if we look at it, the front end of the year there was no COVID, and it was great all the way up till around about April standpoint. We had the normal Chinese New Year, but then that was quickly followed by COVID, and then suddenly Europe and Asia went into a nosedive. But and we kept expecting it to come out quicker. But I think our industry's done better than most. I mean, I'd hate to be in the entertainment industry or the airline industry right now. So I think we're pretty robust. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of people still making parts even when the countries are relatively closed down. I mean, but the purchasing people, the sales people, the marketing people are working from home, whilst the production people are on the front line working, and the warehouse people are in the warehouse picking parts. So it has affected, but I think we've got through it pretty well, to be honest. Yeah.
Frank, do you want to?
I can take it, Dave. I would echo everything that Mark said. I think the way demand has held up has been remarkable, just given the global scale that this has touched and the amount of disruption it had for many months as we tried to solution those gaps, as we talked about. And the freight side was one area. We had a lot of suppliers who were shut down, and we had to go and help them get reopened if they were part of the essential supply chain. Yeah, and we've got puts and takes. The automotive industry was down for a while, and that's came back. And of course, healthcare was up and to the right, and you've got telecom networking up and to the right as well. But overall, demand in the industries that at least Jabil serves, and we serve, we're fortunate enough to have a very diverse customer portfolio that we serve a multitude of industries and markets, has held up remarkably well. So as far as a forecast goes, unless there's some other crazy turn that no one's predicting with COVID, or some other disaster that's out there we don't know about, I see the second half of the year. I don't think it will be anything incredible, but I don't think things are going to go down too much. I think the supply chain, the demand is there. And just because the way we have shifted our purchasing doesn't mean necessarily that a lot of it is down. It's just different in the way we're buying things or we're looking for products. I think things are going to be okay.
Great. Dave, I don't want to turn this into an earnings call, but how's your forecast prognosis for this year?
You know what? I will. Yeah, and I'll focus on the forward-facing. Second half, we feel good. We've seen momentum starting to build. Mark mentioned earlier customer count. Throughout most disruptions, our global industry, our engineers seem to focus on designing their way out. They're not going to necessarily build what was yesterday's demand. It's look for the new demand. Customer counts up. We've seen that strengthening after that dip came initially in April, and oh my God, after the initial surge of panic buying. If it wasn't toilet paper, right afterwards there was components, but then that subsided. And now we see, we're seeing a good steady growth projection. We're up year over year, and we're seeing good indicators that's in a broad breadth of product spaces.
This is tremendous. See, I'm glad we're having this conversation, because sometimes we all get in that gloom and doom fog, but hearing three optimistic perspectives is actually quite nice.
Dave, there's lots of people working at home. I mean, just to give you a couple of numbers, just to show how many. We get 370,000 people a day who are coming on visiting our website, and that's 1.8 million page views. So there's a lot of people out there looking at stuff, and Dave's got the same or bigger numbers or whatever they are. But it's that type of ilk of engineers and purchasing people sitting at home, looking for data, looking for parts, coming on the websites. And, I think as we go through the rest of the year, me too, it's going to get slightly better. And next year, it's going to be another good year, I think, for the industry, unless COVID stays a lot longer. And 5G is going to mean that we will probably move into some allocation next year too, yeah?
Oh, that's oh my gosh. Well, there's a bombshell. You know what? We need a second keynote. Let me call and adjust some schedules so we can extend this another hour. No, that's really fascinating. Thanks for sharing that, Mark. All right, let me get back to the let me get back to the question here. This is Greg with 2 G's. If you're listening, Greg, I don't know, man. This is a pretty specific question about Jabil. So, Frank, this might be a competitor. I'll let you decide, but this is a pretty specific question. Jabil has talked about resilient supply chain and its importance in all markets. Can't argue with that. How has the global pandemic changed this, if any? Any changes that you've seen, Frank?
Yeah, well, there's a change in as much as I think we are more acutely aware of our own supply chain. And, again, just speaking for Jabil, Dave, we've got between our direct spend, so all our components and PCBs, interconnects, semiconductors, capacitors, and the plastics and metal, the skin that goes around our customers' products, and the indirect side, all the goods and services that we have to buy in order to support the company and its growth. We've got 38,000 suppliers that we deal with on an annual basis, and around just over $22 billion of annual spend that comes with those 38,000 relationships. We are diving deeper into those relationships and investing in some technologies that allow us to understand how much risk is 1, 2, 3 levels down. Who are we actually dealing with here? Do they have the financial wherewithal to be resilient, to come through these types of things? Do they have access to capital? Are they public? Are they private? Where are they based? Who are they? So we're caring more about that than we ever did, and making sure that we do understand our supply chain in a much more deeper, transparent way than we have done in the past. So I don't know if anything will change, other than I think we'll look for further ways to consolidate our spend into partners that we trust, that we believe do have financial resiliency, who are ethical, who can be trusted long-term partners. And I would look to the 2 gentlemen here. They're part of that trusted supply chain that Jabil strives for every day. So I don't see a huge change. I just think we're going to be more cognizant of who we're doing business with, and a lot more smarter on who we do business with in the future as well.
Absolutely. I truly hope that our audience is gaining an appreciation during this panel discussion for just how much effort and activity is going on in the world in order to provide a resilient supply chain. It's pretty remarkable that even when we've got people who have to stay home all over the world, that we can still turn a prototype very quickly and understand, the components are going to be there, the circuit board's going to work. It's quite remarkable. 2 more questions, and these are actually both from the same person. Amanda asks, I'm an engineer and I'm wondering what's the difference. I love this question. All right. I'm an engineer and I'm wondering what's the difference in buying parts off Amazon versus going to a traditional distributor like you guys.
Sure. The first easy one is you deal with a traditional distributor, you know where the parts are coming from. Mark and I are both part of an association, and it is all about authorized sources. It's about making sure there's no counterfeit product getting into the supply chain. My wife, myself, and my personal life, we consume a lot on Amazon. But when it comes to our space, this idea of authenticity, and then just you want to be subject matter experts. We've talked on and on about content, that rich content that doesn't exist today. And what really goes underappreciated with what Mouser and DigiKey does is the value added. Very little comes in a box and goes out of our warehouse in the same box. It's cut down. I need a partial tube, a partial tray, a partial reel. I need it re-reeled. Give me a custom quantity and then put it back on your own reel so I can ingest it into my pick and place. Those are services, the way I've described it. It's not that Amazon can't do that. They've got a lot of money. They're a big organization. But, if they're that velociraptor in the jungle, we're that spiky turtle, our part of it, that do they want to wrestle and try to get into the space, or is there other lower hanging fruit while we continue to try to build those services tailored to this engineering audience versus the consumer world?
I think one word I'd add there is not recommended for new design. I mean, Amazon's not going to tell you when a part's gone out of it. It's really not recommended for you to do anything with, but certainly ourselves, and I know DigiKey too. I mean, we're in agreement on so many things here today. It's pretty good. So, but we will recommend if a part's not a good one for your new design, we'll tell you what the right parts are. We'll make sure we get inventory of the right parts, and that really helps. Amazon would never do that.
Absolutely. And, I've again had a neutral party here, Switzerland. I've been inside of electronics distributor warehouses, and I've seen the care with which, whether it's cutting a tape and reel or like you said, a tube or a tray. I only need 8, and it's not something that you want somebody who is maybe not an expert or has significant industry experience in understanding, the importance of ESD protection, understanding the importance of cut this, not that, and here's how. So those are very good points. I can't speak.
I would maybe say, Dave, there's a place for Amazon, certainly, in at least from my viewpoint, and from a Amazon Business Services, office equipment, office supplies, all day long, no problem. Electronic components, no. We need the trusted partners who have invested, millions and millions over the years to ensure that there is true customer care being taken when they're recommending these products. And that's the guys you have in front of you, plus their competition in this space as well. It's not an Amazon. Maybe in 10 years' time, who knows? But certainly I would recommend engineers use Amazon for electronic component content today.
But maybe just one more piece I think that's critical is we learn from Amazon, from a consumer experience. We've been on the web for a couple of decades, but we're following. Everyone on this call, including ourselves, is buying, and that shopping cart experience is so much we can gather and bring into our ecosystem to bring value.
Yep. And what I will say I very much appreciate about both of the distributors who are being represented here, and to a lesser extent, other distributors have maybe made some progress, but not many. There's 2 ways that I want to get to a component. One is a flawless search bar. Just give me the magnifying glass icon, and I want to put it in there either in colloquial terms or a part number that ends with TR. Whatever it is, I want to be able to put that in and then see real inventory, not inventory that you might be able to get. So you're going to list it as a part on your site that I actually can't get because it's out of stock. But in both of your cases, you've got excellent search capabilities, at least from my perspective. It's kind of a subjective thing. But you've also got that, like I said, that funnel that gets me down to, I'm not sure which part I need, but I know that what I'm trying to do is brushless DC motor control. And why don't you serve me up a block diagram, and I'll take a look at the available options that are out there. And that, again, is subject matter expertise that you maybe won't find elsewhere. But kind of taking what you said, Dave, learning from the e-commerce brilliance of Amazon, unquestionable brilliance, and adapting that for how engineers look for things, buy things. In the end, it won't be the same experience. And so, I would kind of echo all these same opinions. Amazon has its place, and I think that's been the spirit of this whole panel discussion, is everything in the industry kind of has its place. And then Amanda has another, I kind of already asked this, I guess, but I'll ask it on behalf of her. For Jabil, if she's got smaller projects, or her team, a small company, is there like a minimum business level that she should even, before she even considers talking to you, she needs to be able to reach? Or is there ever an inappropriate time, it sounds like, is this question, to engage with an EMS?
The short answer, David, no, there's no minimum. In fact, we would encourage engineers to come to us, startups, small companies, guys with ideas, who think they've got something, and allow us to partner with you and determine whether we think, your idea could make it to mass market, or to the point where we would be willing to provide funding and access to equipment and a space that you can actually bring that product to life as well. So I think that the days of having any mins of that are over. We are looking to bring products to life, and that can be at the very start of the idea, or like more traditional customers where the idea has been formed and it's more of a collaborative effort to bring it to mass production. Wherever you want to fit within that range, I think we've got the capability and the appetite to go help.
Yep. Awesome. One last question for me. Are either of your three companies hiring content marketers? Because I know a guy. I just want to play for a winning team, and all three of you are just knocking it out of the park. This has been so much fun, and unfortunately, we're out of time, almost right on the button too. But really, guys, I personally couldn't have enjoyed this conversation any more than I have. So, Frank, Dave, Mark, thank you so much for joining me, guys. I really appreciate all this.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Thank you. It's really easy to admire all the work you've been doing, and I certainly look forward to seeing the continued evolution of our electronics supply chain, driven by folks like you who actually get engineers and understand what engineers are trying to do. And to you watching at home or from work, wherever, thanks to all of you for hanging out with us this week. It's really been a joy to provide these awesome keynote sessions all week. And we will see you soon on Moore's Lobby. Take care, everybody.